Hey, tell them son of a up there, if I go one more time and this thing don't work, I'm going to grab their I'm tired of this
Hum baby. Enjoy this great game.
Welcome to another Hum Baby Baseball Countdown, and today we'll be counting down my top 15 managers in MLB history. It's a very tough ranking, as it's not always clear who's most responsible for great teams, the manager or the amazing players. Was Miller Huggins the reason the 27 Yankees were so good? Or maybe it had a little something to do with Babe Ruth and Lou Gehrig. But for that example, the Yankees struggled before Huggins and then again after he left, even with Ruth and Gehrig in the lineup. So while managers can only be great if they have great players, a poor manager can still lose games, even with great players. Knowing how to manage a bunch of MLB players with huge personalities and egos, as well as keeping a team motivated through a long, grueling MLB season, are as important as knowing when to pinch hit, when to make a pitching change, and what order to put the lineup in. The best managers are the ones who can stick around for decades, keep the team chemistry positive, lead their team to multiple championships, and simply bring out the best in their players. Someone who's not a natural leader probably won't last long being an MLB manager. So here we go with my top 15 MLB managers of all time, considering their win-loss record, championships, longevity, as well as what their players had to say about them. But before we get into the top 15, here are 5 honorable mentions. Terry Francona, currently approaching 2,000 career wins as the manager of the Cleveland Guardians. Tito had an average start to his career with the Phillies, but got a second opportunity with the Red Sox in 2004 and led them to a World Series ring, breaking the curse of the Bambino, and then another in 2007, before heading to Cleveland, where he has won 4 division titles and 1 pennant. Francona has 3 Manager of the Year awards. Earl Weaver. Weaver is 6th all-time with a .583 winning percentage as manager of the Orioles for 17 seasons. He didn't quite reach 1,500 wins, but Weaver was an early version of the modern-day manager. He believed in pitching, defense, and the 3-run bomb. He wasn't as focused on small ball, and his strategy paid off as Weaver led the Orioles to 4 AL pennants and a world championship, and he was also notorious for his epic rants and meltdowns when the umpiring was not on point.
You're here for one goddamn specific reason.
What's that, Earl?
Just fuck us!
Ah, you're full of shit.
Lou Piniella. With over 1,800 wins, Piniella definitely deserves an honorable mention. He is a 2-time Manager of the Year award winner and led the Mariners to a franchise record 116-win season in 2001. Sweet Lou was hired as the manager of the Reds in 1990 and took them to the World Series, where they swept the powerful A's. He managed 21 seasons all told, with 7 playoff appearances, managing the M's, Reds, Yankees, Devil Rays, and Cubs. Jim Leyland. Leyland is one of the few managers to win a pennant in both the NL and AL, and he was the skipper of the Marlins when they won their first World Series in 1997. He led those powerful early 90s Pirates teams to 3 straight NL East titles, although they couldn't get past the NLCS. He did the same thing with Detroit, winning 3 straight AL Central titles, but they also failed to win it all, although the Tigers did reach the World Series in 2012, but were swept by the Giants. Bill McKechnie. A former dead ball era player, Bill McKechnie was one of the early great managers of the game, known as Deacon for his quiet and unassuming demeanor and regular participation in the church choir. McKechnie became the first manager to win a World Series with 2 separate teams, the Reds and Pirates. He's 16th all-time in wins and also led his teams to 4 pennants. He was the manager of the Boston Braves in 1935 when Babe Ruth played his final season. A terrible year all around, as Ruth lasted just a month before retiring, and the Braves lost 115 games. Still, overall, McKechnie had a great managerial career with a .524 winning percentage. Now let's get into the top 15. Number 15, Bucky Harris. At the young age of 27, Bucky Harris was hired by the Senators to be a player manager, and he led the team to a World Series championship. He picked up the nickname Boy Wonder. Harris went on to manage 29 seasons, the 4th most in MLB history, winning 2,158 games, along with 3 pennants and 2 World Series. He won the second title with the Yankees in 1947 and was one of the earliest managers to deploy relief pitchers on a regular basis, not expecting every starter to pitch all 9 innings. He was a great player's manager, which likely stemmed from managing guys older than he was at the start of his managerial career. If you can't play for Bucky, you don't belong in the major leagues, said Joe DiMaggio. Number 14, Tommy Lasorda. With 1,599 wins, Tommy Lasorda didn't quite reach 2,000, but no one can deny he is an absolute legend and managed the Los Angeles Dodgers for 20 years from 1976 to 1996 with an amazing ability to get the most out of his young talent. During his tenure, 9 Dodger rookies won Rookie of the Year awards. Lasorda's managerial career started off with back-to-back NL championships in 77 and 78, and he had a career .526 winning percentage, 4 pennants, and 2 World Series rings, one in 81 and another in 88. He was inducted into the Hall of Fame a year after his retirement, and in 2000 managed the U.S. Olympic baseball team to a gold medal. He is in the top 5 all-time MLB managers for longest tenure with the same team, 21 years as the Dodgers manager, and went on to become vice president of the team. All told, as a player, manager, and front office executive, Lasorda spent over 70 years as part of the Dodgers organization. Number 13, Leo Durocher. One of the most larger-than-life characters in baseball history, Leo Durocher won over 2,000 games as manager of the Dodgers, Giants, Cubs, and Astros. His fiery personality and banter with the umps, front office, and MLB executives led to his nickname, the Lip. However, despite the controversies, he knew how to manage, and in 1941 he led the Dodgers to their first pennant in 21 years. Later, he left to manage the rival Giants and led them to an almost impossible 13.5-game comeback late in 1951, leading to the famous Bobby Thompson shot heard around the world. Later, his Giants swept the Indians in the 1954 World Series. He retired with the second most wins in National League managerial history. Based on the amount of years he managed, only 1 World Series title is a little low, but with an overall winning percentage of .540 and over 2,000 wins, Durocher is definitely one of the best managers in MLB history. Number 12, Dusty Baker. Up next is the great Dusty Baker, who beats out Durocher after winning his first World Series title in 2022 with the Houston Astros. Baker now has 2,149 wins, 8th all-time, and also has a .540 winning percentage. He won the Manager of the Year award 3 times, including his debut managerial season in 1993 when he led the San Francisco Giants to 103 wins. But the Giants just missed out on the playoffs because the Atlanta Braves won 104, and the wild card had not yet been instituted. From 2008 to 2013, he managed the Reds, and they made their first 3 postseason appearances since 1995. In fact, Baker took every team he managed to the postseason at least once: the Giants, Cubs, Reds, Nationals, and Astros. The players he manages have only positive things to say about Dusty Baker, who will go down as one of the greatest managers ever. Number 11, BRUCE BOCHY. Even before leading the San Francisco Giants to 3 World Series rings in 5 years, BRUCE BOCHY was a great manager for the Padres, leading them to 4 division titles in 12 years, many of which he had to manage a very young team in a rebuilding process. He won over 900 games with the Padres and then over 900 with the Giants, becoming the only manager to win at least 900 games with 2 separate teams. During the 2010, 2012, and 2014 seasons, he led the Giants to a World Series ring each time despite being underdogs in every single playoff series. Bochy eventually retired, but returned in 2023 to manage the Rangers, and as of this recording, he has led the team to a 60-43 record to lead the American League West. Bochy has 2,063 wins and counting, and has improved his career win-loss percentage to .499, still just short of .500, which is the only reason he comes in this low. Based on his performance in Texas, however, that percentage could jump above .500 very soon. Number 10, Casey Stengel. Coming in at number 10 is the legendary Casey Stengel, who led the Yankees to the World Series 10 times in 12 years, although obviously guys like Joe DiMaggio, Mickey Mantle, Yogi Berra, and Whitey Ford may have had a little something to do with it as well. Before he took over the Yankees, Stengel managed the Brooklyn Dodgers and Boston Braves, never finishing above 5th place. And at the end of his career, he managed a terrible New York Mets expansion team, losing over 100 games each year. Nevertheless, his time with the Yankees cannot be ignored, and he led several powerhouse Yankee teams to the Fall Classic, winning an unprecedented 5 consecutive World Championships. In total, he led the Yankees to 7 world titles and 10 AL pennants. Unfortunately, when not managing those stacked Yankee teams, he has a .397 winning percentage, which is why he comes in a little lower than you might have expected. Incredibly, his years with the Yankees still bump his overall percentage up to .508, and when combined with his colorful personality and legendary quotes, Stengel still belongs in the top 10. Number 9, Miller Huggins. Huggins began his managerial career during the final 4 years of his playing career with the St. Louis Cardinals. He was credited with helping fix a young Rogers Hornsby's batting stance. In 1918, he took over a struggling New York Yankees team and helped turn them into champions, leading them to 3 World Series championships. He was a master at the fundamentals and drilled these principles into the minds of his players. He was also instrumental in several trades and transactions that helped build the Yankee juggernauts of the 1920s, even though many of his trades were unpopular at first. He was a great motivator and knew how to handle big personalities. "He was the only man who knew how to keep me in line," said Babe Ruth. He took the Yankees to the World Series in 1926, 27, and 28, winning it all in 27 and 28. He passed away before the end of the season in 1929. And even with Ruth, Gehrig, Tony La Russa, and other greats, the Yankees finished in 3rd place in 1930. Even though he won just 1,413 games due to his death at just 51 years old, Huggins had a career .555 winning percentage with 6 pennants and 3 world titles. Number 8, Connie Mack. Imagine a manager from the 1960s still managing today. That would equal 7 decades of managing Major League Baseball, something only one man has ever done, and that's Connie Mack. He started out his managerial career in the 1890s, and his final season was 1950. He managed for a total of 53 years, including 50 with the Philadelphia Athletics. Because of the sheer number of games he managed, Mack easily comes in at number 1 all time with 3,731 wins. The downside is he's also number 1 in losses with 3,948. Still, Mack is an all-time legend, famous for wearing his trademark business suit, standing tall in the A's dugout for 50 years. He led them through 2 dynasties, which included 9 pennants and 5 World Series titles. He was also manager through a few rough patches, which might have resulted in a firing had he not been a partial owner of the team. At one point, the A's had 10 consecutive losing seasons under Mack. As a manager, he was easygoing, but did demand his players follow a code of conduct, making sure that they composed themselves as professionals on and off the field. And Mack demanded that they judge others as individuals and never on the basis of race or religion. He managed until the age of 87. Overall, Connie Mack is very hard to rank because he has a losing record, but he did win his share of games and championships, and he is certainly number 1 as far as longevity. Number 7, Joe Torre. After an 18-year playing career that included an MVP and over 250 home runs, Joe Torre went on to manage 5 different teams for nearly 30 years, winning a 5th best all-time 2,326 games. His first managerial stint did not go too well with the Mets after 5 losing seasons from 1971 to 1981, and he was let go. Things went better in Atlanta in 1982 when he took the Braves to the playoffs for the first time since 1969. Unfortunately, after finishing in 2nd in 83 and then 3rd in 84, he was fired, moving to the broadcast booth for a few years until the Cardinals hired him in 1990. He never made the playoffs and was fired halfway through the 95 season. It was at this point that the Yankees made the surprising choice to hire Joe Torre as manager, to the dismay of most Yankees fans. He had never won a playoff game in 14 years as manager. As it turned out, he hit his stride in New York and won the Manager of the Year award in 1996, kicking off a Yankee dynasty that included 12 consecutive postseason berths and 4 World Series championships in 5 years. He led the Yankees to 6 pennants in 8 years and 10 AL East championships in 12 years. Torre finished his managerial career with the Dodgers, winning the NL West in 2 out of 3 seasons. Although it's true he didn't become a winning manager until he had a stacked roster, he did a great job of handling the big personalities along with the high-pressure media and fans of New York. He's a great manager, said former Yankees third baseman Scott Brocious. There is more to it than who to pitch and play. It's managing people, the press, and Joe does that all great. Players follow the tone set by the manager, and Joe is the calming influence of this team. Despite his early struggles with the Mets, Braves, and Cards, he finished his career with a .538 winning percentage. Number 6, Walter Alston. He might be the only Hall of Famer who struck out in his only career MLB at-bat. That's because, of course, Walter Alston was inducted for his managing career with the Dodgers, who had never won a World Series championship until Alston came on board. Once the quiet and unknown Walter Alston took over the team in 1954, the improvements were immediate, and in '55, the Dodgers won it all. They returned to the Fall Classic in 1956, losing in 7 games to the Yankees, but year after year, the Dodgers brought him back on a 1-year contract, and he ended up managing the team for 23 seasons in both Brooklyn and Los Angeles. He led the Dodgers to 7 pennants and their first 4 World Series titles, still the majority of their 7 overall rings. Even after the retirement of Sandy Koufax in 1966, the Dodgers stayed competitive under Alston, winning at least 85 games in each of his final 8 seasons as manager, leaving the franchise in great shape for his replacement, Tommy Lasorda. Alston won over 2,000 games and had an excellent .558 winning percentage. He had an easygoing and calm demeanor, never yelling at or embarrassing his players. Walt treats his players like men, said former Dodgers outfielder Dixie Walker. If he feels a player isn't doing his best, he doesn't fine him or cuss him out or sit him down and talk with him. He just won't play him anymore. The strategy seemed to pay off for Walter Alston, who was instrumental in making the Dodgers a top-quality franchise they continue to be known as today. Number 5, Bobby Cox. Bobby Cox is one of just 4 MLB managers with over 2,500 wins, and he was at the helm for the Atlanta Braves teams of the 90s and 2000s, leading them to 14 consecutive division titles. Unfortunately, they won just 1 World Series in 1995, which is why he doesn't come in a bit higher. He started out as a manager in the Yankees minor league system before the Braves hired him in 1978. He made some improvements to the poor Braves teams of the late 70s and early 80s, but was eventually fired before moving on to manage the Blue Jays, who had just finished dead last in '81. He turned the team around, improving year after year until finishing in first place in 1985. He returned to the Braves as general manager in '86. But when no manager could get the job done on the field, he hired himself in 1990 and took another last-place team to the playoffs in '91, this time all the way to the World Series, where the Braves lost in extra innings in Game 7 to the Twins in one of the greatest fall classics of all time. Known as a player's manager, Cox treated his players with respect while instilling a winning attitude. He was the single greatest influence on me as a player in terms of teaching the game, respecting the game, carrying yourself the right way on and off the field, said former Braves pitcher Tom Glavine. Cox also has a big league record, 158 ejections, creating entertainment for the crowd while defending his players. Number 4, Sparky Anderson. Sparky Anderson managed for 26 consecutive seasons, first with the Reds from '70 to '78, and then from '79 to '95 with the Detroit Tigers, compiling an impressive .545 winning percentage and 2,194 total wins. Before starting his managerial career in Cincinnati, the Reds were a good team until Sparky arrived and immediately propelled them into a franchise record 102 wins in his first season. The Big Red Machine made the playoffs in 4 of Sparky's first 5 years there, and they won it all in '75 and '76. They re-broke that franchise record of 102 wins with 106 in '75, and the Reds, who've been around since 1869, have won over 100 games in a season just 3 times, all with Sparky Anderson as manager. He is hands down the best manager in Reds history, but was mysteriously fired after the 1978 season, in which the Reds won 92 games and finished in second place, just 2.5 games out of first. The Tigers immediately began negotiating a deal to hire Anderson, despite having already hired a new manager, Les Moss. They fired Moss a third of the way into his first season, not because of underperformance, but simply because they wanted Sparky. And the Tigers quickly improved as a team, winning it all in 1984, which is still their most recent World Series championship. Sparky Anderson posted a winning record in 19 of his first 20 seasons as manager, and other than managing some horrible 1990s Tigers teams, his resume is stellar. He was great at handling great players. He knew the guys to slap and he knew the guys to kiss, said Bill Gullickson, a former Tigers pitcher. Anderson retired after the '95 season and was inducted into the Hall of Fame in 2000.
There's no way possible he ever takes it. No way. Get out of here. Get out of there.
Number 3, Tony La Russa. La Russa has managed an MLB team in 6 separate decades and is second all-time in wins behind Connie Mack with 2,902 wins. He won over 50% of his games with every team that he's managed, the White Sox, A's, and Cardinals, and has a career .536 winning percentage with a 70-58 postseason record. He started out as a minor league manager in the White Sox system before landing the job at the big league level in 1979, and from there, the White Sox slowly improved, eventually winning 99 games in 83, winning the AL West. He then headed for Oakland in 1987 to try to improve another struggling team who had finished with a losing record for 7 straight years. He got them to 587 and then to the World Series in 88. In 1989, they won it all, sweeping the Giants in the Battle of the Bay World Series. The A's won 3 straight AL championships under La Russa, who later managed several great Cardinals teams, leading them to 2 world championships, one in 2006 and another in 2011. The Cards finished in first place under La Russa 7 times and made the postseason 9 times. He later came out of retirement in 2021, returning to the White Sox, who finished in first place in the AL Central. Unfortunately, his last tenure with the Sox didn't go completely smoothly, and there were some controversial moments for La Russa, such as calling out his own player for hitting a home run in garbage time with a 3-0 count, and a decision to intentionally walk a batter with a 1-2 count in order to face Max Muncy, who promptly homered. La Russa retired permanently following the 2022 season with 6 pennants, 3 World Series rings, and despite the controversies, he is still one of the greatest managers in the history of the A's, Cardinals, and MLB in general. Number 2, John McGraw. I wanted to go with the great Giants manager John McGraw at number 1, but he fell just short. McGraw managed in 5 different decades and 2 different centuries, beginning his managerial career in 1899 as a 26-year-old player-manager of the 19th century Baltimore Orioles franchise. He was one of the most aggressive managers of all time, with one goal in mind: winning at all costs. He loved to steal, hit and run, and put pressure on the opponent. His leadership skills were immediately evident with the Orioles and 1 year with the Cardinals. And after his move to the Giants in 1901, he became one of the greatest managers in the game, turning the Giants into an absolute powerhouse, winning 106 games in 1904 and the pennant, but not playing in the World Series because McGraw and the Giants ownership felt that the American League was an inferior league. After winning 105 games in 1905, McGraw and the Giants played this time against the Philadelphia A's, winning it 4-1. He led the Giants to 3 straight pennants from 1911 to 1913, back-to-back World Series titles in 21 and 22, and a total of 10 pennants and 3 World Series championships. McGraw is 3rd all-time with 2,763 wins, but his winning percentage of .586 is higher than both Tony La Russa and Connie Mack, who have more wins. His leadership skills are undeniable, and John McGraw is in the conversation as the greatest manager in MLB history. Number 1, Joe McCarthy. However, I had to go at number 1 with Joe McCarthy, who just edges out John McGraw. Even though he comes in 9th all-time with 2,125 wins, no manager has a better winning percentage, an incredible .615. In fact, Joe McCarthy never had a losing season in his 26-year managerial career. Never a day went by when you didn't learn something from Joe McCarthy, said Yankee great Joe DiMaggio. He started out as manager of the Cubs and took them to the World Series in 1929. William Wrigley Sr., in one of the worst moves of his professional life, fired McCarthy partway through 1930, blaming him for losing the '29 series. In 1931, McCarthy was hired by the Yankees, who had won only 3 World Series titles at that point, despite getting Babe Ruth in 1920. Under McCarthy, the Yanks went on an absolutely incredible tear, winning 8 AL pennants and 7 World Series rings in 12 years, including 4 straight appearances in the Fall Classic. He used a low-key approach, rarely arguing with umpires and staying in the dugout for most of the game, even when making a pitching change. McCarthy wore no number on his jersey, but he had the heart of a teacher, knew how to develop talent, and how to handle big personalities like Babe Ruth, who was not a huge fan of McCarthy since the Bambino wanted to be manager. McCarthy won the Manager of the Year award in the first year of its existence and went on to win 2 more. He finished his career managing the Red Sox to 96 wins in 48 and 49 before resigning midway through the 50 season. Overall, he was a winner everywhere he went, and based on the resume, the fact that he never had a losing season and has the best winning percentage of any manager with over 2,100 wins, I had to put McCarthy at number 1. And that does it for this week's countdown of the greatest managers in MLB history. Let me know your thoughts down below, and I know I'll get names of several managers I left out. There's no way I could have named them all. Shout out to all the great MLB managers: Joe Madden, Chuck Tanner, Ralph Houck, Mike Scioscia, and of course, Humm baby, the great Roger Craig. Rest in peace, he passed away earlier this year. All the great managers in MLB history, but again, I just can't mention them all. So everybody have a great day. Hit that thumbs up, hit that subscribe button, and we will talk to you in the next video.